Hi friends, welcome. This is Loli. Today I have a treat, 3 DIYs. Please enjoy. And here we go. DIY number 1. I use one of these cutting boards from the Dollar Tree. I think I got this in springtime if I'm not mistaken. So we're gonna go ahead and get it all prepped up, take everything off, and get it ready to be painted. I'm gonna be sanding everything up. The corners were a little rough, making sure I got everything correct. Give it all the dust from your tables because we are going to be painting it. Here I'm using the celery color from Waverly, and I gave it one thick coat. I did want it to still have some of that wood peeking through, so I just did a thick coat and I made it a little bit streaky so it looked pretty farmhouse. Once that was done, I went ahead and used my heat gun and made it dry, and we are going to add this decal that we also got from the Dollar Tree. This decal comes with a film over it. Remove that. Make sure that you have your decal placed exactly where you want it. Make sure it is centered in all sides, and we will use the burnisher to rub that on. Once you're peeling it off, use the burnisher to make sure that everything remains down and nothing lifts up with the film. And this is what I ended up with. Now what we are going to do is add a little bow. I should have done this after, but for some reason I wanted to embellish it first instead of protecting it. So if you are planning to do this DIY, please seal your cutting board first with Mod Podge and then add your bow. I put the cart before the horse on this one, but it still turned out okay. So what I do to make this bow, I make one of those awareness bows, and then I bring down the loop down to form the 2 loops for the bow there, and I'm hanging on to it because I forgot to get some twine to hold it together. But I go ahead and take some jute cord, and I use one of my little clips to help me hold the bow in place while I cut the jute cord. And we are going to use just a small piece of jute cord, enough to tie a knot. I'm only going to tie 1 knot because when I tie 2 knots, the bow tends to not lay flat. So I'm doing 1. Oh, I'm sorry, there I went a little accident. I knocked down my heat gun trying to make sure that that was pretty tight. Once that is tight, you go ahead and cut off your pieces. I added a little bit of hot glue to that seam to ensure that it didn't become unraveled, and added a extra bit of hot glue there and added it there to my cutting board. Making sure that it was straight and that the glue did not go on other parts and had my bow looking all crooked. This is what I ended up with at that point. And I was like, uh-oh, I forgot to do something. I am going to add some borders to this. I did not like the piece like that. I wanted it to finish and have a more finished look in the edges, so I added some of this full card black paint on all my edges. This is going to be a 2-sided sign, so I added black because it went well with both sides. And now we are going to seal our paint in and our decal in with some matte Mod Podge. Again, if you do this before you add your bow, so you have a more seamless application and you don't have to lift the bow like I had to do there in order to get all the little ends there sealed in. This makes it easy when you're cleaning and dusting your piece. You want it to be sealed in so you're not adding any dirt to your paint, and over time it will get all dirty. So I like to seal all my things with some Mod Podge. Usually just do 1 layer. Here I'm drying everything with my heat gun, my best friend forever. And there we go with that piece. And I added a bow also to the other side, which I did not film, guys, but I used a buffalo check bow from not bow, I'm sorry, buffalo check ribbon from Michaels. Before I do that, I am adding some beads there. These beads came with a different sign. I just kept them, and I'm adding it to some jute twine to make a hanging thing there. I used, in the first end, I created a loop in which I can be able to use in order to hang my piece. I made sure that all my beads were against it, and I used my lighter to get rid of any little hairs from the jute twine there. And now I'm going to loop the next end into the hole there. I do one loop around it, and I make a double knot there and remove the excess. If you do this, guys, try not to make it as stiff as I did. It would have been cuter if the beads will dangle if you want to just lean it against the wall. But I was thinking of just hanging this up, so I didn't mind really it being that way. For a final little touch there, I'm adding a sunflower. I took out two because, as I said before, this is gonna be a double-sided decor piece, so I am decorating both sides. I was happy with the original piece that it came with, the original decor piece. I'm just adding another option on the other side, and there we go. And here it is completed. And we are going to add a sunflower on the original sign also. What I do is remove the little piece of wire off of it, and do not throw out those little pieces of wire, guys. It's very helpful when you're trying to make tiny little bows like I made there. Instead of using jute twine, you can use the wire, tie it around. It gives you a almost seamless thing. And there we go. This is the finished look. Here's the black and white side. Here is the green. And I am in love with this piece, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Here we go with DIY number 2. For DIY number 2, I used that piece there from the Dollar Tree that looks like a jar. I sanded it down, removed all the glitter, and I'm going to be using this was a craft book paper from Michaels. I got this also on clearance for $5, and I put in there the jar, NDS jar, underneath the piece of scrapbook paper, and I'm using my fingers to carve out or indent the section so I know exactly where to cut. So I cut using that seam that was created there. Once that was cut out, I placed it on top of my MDF mason jar, and I do the creasing again to make sure that everything is as close as possible. Some ends were not as close, so I still did the indents to make sure to cut out that end, or if you can, it's a lot easier to use the what do you call it, the emery board, an emery board, or a sanding block in the corners and in the edges so you can get a cut piece. But this paper was pretty thick, it was kind of hard to sand down, so I try to make it as close as possible to the mason jar there, so I had minimal sanding to do. And in there, in the little indents, I cut a little slit, and I went over it again to mark the indents, so I'm able to cut out the little indents from the scrapbook paper as well, so it matches pretty perfectly on there. Now I will be using some of my high gloss Mod Podge. I barely use this for any sealing. I usually use it for adding sticking things together or laying scrapbook or things like that, for decoupage pretty much. So I add a generous coat there. Make sure that all the ends and everything had a generous coat, and then I'm placing down my paper, making sure that everything is seamless and everything is in the place it should be. And we smooth everything out. Once everything air bubbles are gone, I am sealing the top part with some Mod Podge. Now it's time to make sure that everything is, as close to the edge as possible. So I sanded all the excess, make sure that all the dust is away from all my surfaces, because we are going to go ahead and go to the second part. We are wiping everything down, make sure there's no dust, and sanding. After sanding and clean it up twice again, and we are going to be using these little wood cutouts on DollarTree. They come every fall season, and this packet I already had used in a previous DIY, so I was trying to figure out which would be the best one suitable for this piece, and I went with this one, the Hello Fall. I like how it sat in there, and I like the way that the words were fixed together as well, so we are going to be using that. And I was thinking of making it the same theme I was talking about, that it was like that light turquoise color and like a light peachy color. So I was trying to achieve that look by mixing my pumpkin upper barrel paint there with some of my upper barrel acrylic white paint as well. Alright, so here we want to achieve a lighter color, so try to put more white than pumpkin color, or because otherwise you will be going through what I just did there. Just keep adding white until I got to it. It's a lot easier to just add a little bit of the orange instead in this case, because you're going for a much lighter finish. So this was my first idea to do. Sometimes you gotta get things done to see how they actually work. So I went with this color. I was hoping this was what was going to be what I intended, but we all know that our plans do not always go according to plan. So I let it dry, and in the meantime, while that was drying, I am adding some jute twine to the top of my mason jar, and just keep wrapping it and wrapping it and wrapping it, until I got to the end in which it starts tapering off. That part is a lot easier, a lot harder actually, for the jute twine to stay put. So there I am adding a little bit more glue in between my revolutions there as I'm wrapping around, to make sure that everything stayed in the position in which I needed it to sit on, so everything was even and nothing will slide off or anything like that. So I'm sorry here, guys, that everything is a little bit out of focus, but I pretty much just continue the same method there. Added a little bit of glue, wrapped, added a little bit of glue, wrapped. I did that until I got to the top, and I no longer could see the craft paper in the top there of the mason jar. And here we go, this is all finished. We are going to burn off all the little strays and make sure that this is nice and tidy, and it gives it a no more finished look, so I was pretty happy with that. Now we check to see where we want our piece. On camera this actually looks pretty cute like this with that color, but in reality, like when you look at it in real life, it was not as muted. It had a very neon look to it, which was definitely not something that I was going for. So what I did was I just went over it with some white to give it a little whitewash finish, trying my hardest to tone down that neon orange, but that did not work that great. So I went with a different approach, and I'm going in with my, I believe this is chestnut color from Apple Barrel, and I'm just going with this. It's more like a burnt orange kind of feel to it. So here we're making sure that everything is dry. I don't want any paint to ruin my back in there. And this is the finished product. I do like the way that hello fall sign contrasts on the green, so I was happy with that. We are going to work on additional embellishment. I really wanted to add a leaf to that. I wasn't sure yet if I wanted to keep it natural or not, so I went ahead and attached my fall sign there to the bottom. And now I am going to work on embellishing the top a little more. So I took some more of my jute twine. That is jute twine, guys, that I have in that little bowl there. That's usually the little bowl in the baby section for the little finger food for the babies. I found it to be useful to hold my twine in place while I'm working with it. So I just created a little finger bow by just wrapping the jute twine a few times around my fingers and leaving out two little tails. And then I used a different piece of jute twine to tie it in the middle to create a little bow. Alright, so I'm just making sure that everything is nice and tidy on my bowl there, and attach a little bit of hot glue, and we are putting it in the center there. I was thinking at first of just adding some beads to the tails, but then I felt like maybe I'll be too busy with everything that's going on, so I just left it as it was and just trimmed my little tails there. So here we go again. The theme seems to be sunflowers for me this year, guys. So I added another those little tiny sunflowers that I have done for the previous DIY as well, right in the middle of my bow. I just love the little delicate look that it brings it, and it just ties the whole jute twine together. It just gives it a pop of color right there. Then here I was thinking, you know what, this flower or this leaf also needs some color. It was just, you know, blending in with the jute cord. So I took this my paint from Anita's right there in the color wine, and I am going to completely cover the top of my leaf there, and all I needed was just one single coat of paint for this. It was a very rich red, and the coverage was great. Okay, so in the meantime, while that dried, I went over and I wanted that to be, you know, like tucked in. So I applied some glue and attached it to my ends, and there I am cutting my little ends, and here we go. We are finished. Here's the finished piece, and now it's DIY number 3. This one, we used one of these little houses from the Dollar Tree. The first thing I did was heat up the glue all around the seams because I'm trying to remove the backing of this. Well, guys, this had more than hot glue because it was hard for me to take it off. I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing until I took it off. Here I am removing all the extra paper. I did not want that to show off as I was putting it back together with the new look. So I took my spatula there and scraped off as much as I could of the paper. Make sure that all the edges were cleaned off, that you no longer saw any of that white paper there, and that everything was leveled, because once we are ready to put this together again, we want to make sure that everything is flush and we can put it on securely. Here I am removing all the paper. This wasn't as hard as I thought it would be, so I just did that, cleaned up, and now we are going to be removing that label from the back, because we will be painting the back. So now the front will become the back and the back will become the front, and that's so I can have the most smooth surface. So I painted it again using my same wine color from Anita's, and I did just one coat, and I did a rough coat, and we are going to be painting the frame while that back end is drying. I used my apple barrel acrylic paint for this. I did a slappy coat. I just wanted it to be like a whitewash kind of feel, not like completely covered white. I wanted it to look cohesive, and I wanted it to look rustic still. So I went ahead and did that. And to add some more that rustic look, I used that it's like a chestnut color brown from apple barrel. I just wanted to dry brush it on the white, so I did that. And in the bottle there, it looked a lot more brown. Once I added it to my white, it became more of an orange color, which was not the look I was going for. However, I did like that it looked kind of rusty, so I let it dry for now, but we will be going back to that piece to finalize it. In the meantime, while that's drying, I took some of these pumpkin cutouts I got from DollarTree and painted it with my celery color from Waverly. I did 2 coats with this, drying it in between using my heat gun just to make things easier and quicker. And you see me here doing the second coat, and while that second coat was there, I took some hold on, I'm forgetting something here, guys. I actually let it dry, and then I added some of that same chestnut color to give some contour to the pumpkin, and let that dry on the side. In the meantime, I created this little welcome fall decal using my Cricut, and I found this font in Design Space. I actually used the free trial, and I like it, so I went ahead, used it, printed it, weeded it, and I applied it there. I took one of my tumbling towel blocks and added it to the back so it will have a finish, and I'm sorry, it will not be flush. I wanted it to sit out a little bit, 3D effect. And now I'm creating a little finger bow, and I used one of those little wires from the sunflowers to tie my bow, and it made it pretty easy to do. Next, I take my frame and I add a little bit of my white apple barrel paint just to tone down that orange color. I wanted it to actually peek through very little, so it would look as if this was a metal piece that was rusting from underneath, and it gave it an extra piece of character, and I like the way it turned out this way. So I made my mistake, a beautiful mistake. You cannot see it that much in here, but on reality you look at it and it looks like metal that was painted and rusted. While I was doing that white painting, I got some specks of white on my red there, so I'm just touching up that. And now once everything has dried, it's time to attach the back end to the frame. I used E6000 in some parts and hot glue in others to ensure long-term hold by using the E6000, and temporary hold with the hot glue. Make sure everything was flush, everything was matching correctly, and the piece there was leveled. And now it is time to attach the pumpkin. I attach the pumpkin by adding some hot glue to the tumbling table block and some E6000, so that also will be holding there for a while. Yeah. So here I am putting in the final piece, the cherry on the cake, and added the sunflower, and we are done. Here's the finished piece. I hope you enjoy these DIYs. Thank you for spending the time with me, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye.